Hello, everyone. We are on session 2 of day 2 of our 2021 virtual conference. I am Rachel Altum. I'm the online community manager for the Gypsy Nurse, hosting this week with our CEO, Steve Curtin. From the
Hello again, Rachel.
Hello,
Session number 2 today. We're on a roll.
Yes, and this one is going to be extra important. I know a lot of you travel nurses make a lot of money, and I've seen a lot of you pay off debt and all these other things, but you definitely need to plan for retirement. So we have some great people coming on to speak about that. Steve's going to give a little bit of more information of who we are and all of that. Take it away, Steve.
All right, great. Well, welcome everybody. And as CEO of the Gypsy Nurse, I want to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon. And I want to again thank our travel nurse community for all that you do, particularly during this COVID pandemic. The Gypsy Nurse's mission is to support travel nurses, and we hope you find this session and the others we've planned this week to be informative and helpful in your travel nursing journey. Please remember to visit the gypsynurse.com Spring Virtual Conference Agenda under the Events tab for a full list of all of our virtual events this week. Please bookmark the gypsynurse.com as your source for travel nursing resources, including over 150,000 jobs from over 65 top agencies, housing options, and great content from experts that we publish daily to help you on your travel nursing journey. As a reminder, these sessions will be recorded and available on demand on our website after each session. So you can go back to the events page and see any of the sessions you may have missed on demand. The Gypsy Nurse is the #1 destination for travel nurses, and we thank you for your support. I would also like to thank today's sponsor, Medley, and I would also like to thank Gene Cook, the COO of Travel Nurse Across America, and David Altimont, Senior Vice President and Partner at Lockton. Gene and David will be speaking about planning for retirement for travel nurses today, a very important topic and something that gets quite a bit of activity on our Gypsy Nurse Travel Nurse Network group. So we look forward to hearing from them. And Rachel, back to you.
Yeah, definitely. And I just want to talk about some giveaways we have going on today. If you go on to the gypsynurse.com and go to the events tab Steve was talking about, you can come here and there's a way at the bottom to, there we go, register for the contest or for the virtual conference. So you can also sign up, log in. Over here, there is going to be a register button. I'm not seeing it on my screen, but you'll be able to register on the gypsynurse.com. As a registered user, you'll be entered to win a $100 Amazon gift card. And then before I scroll down to the next part, we do have what Steve was talking about here with being able to watch our previous sessions. So this was yesterday, so you can go ahead and click on any of these ones. Feel free to comment on the post as well. We want to keep these conversations going, especially with like the bullying and keeping humor in travel nursing. There's a lot of great stuff and a lot of great conversations in the comments, so be sure to watch those. You can also see the upcoming sessions that are going to be this week. But once you get down here, you'll be able to register for the virtual conference. You can stay up to date and we can keep you posted about future conferences that we will be holding, other events. So be sure to go on there and register. And then we also have a giveaway during this session. If you comment, ask questions, interact, you'll be entered to win a $50 Amazon gift card. So be sure to ask your questions.
Rachel, you and I are not eligible, right? We want to make that quite clear with the contest rules. We are not eligible. So
the only gift I get is the fact that this conference has such amazing presenters and everyone has been so great in the comments asking questions. That is just a gift of myself. So thank you everybody that's been watching, and it fills my heart. I've been doing this for the past couple months, planning and everything, so I'm glad that everything is coming good together.
It absolutely is, and thank you, Rachel, for putting this together. I know that the community is getting a lot of great information thanks to you and your hard work. So we've got another great session coming up.
Yes, so let's get on to that. We would now like to bring them on. Gene has over 30 years of finance, HR, and risk management experience, with 20 of those years being in executive leadership. David holds degrees in both economics and law and has over 30 years of professional experience working directly with investments and retirement plans. Between the two of them, they have tons and tons of knowledge. So I'm going to go ahead and bring them up so that way you guys can learn as much as you can today.
Hello, Gene. Hello, David.
Good morning.
Hi, Steve.
Wait, good
Hi, Rachel.
afternoon.
Good morning. Yeah.
Good
Whatever time it is.
afternoon. Good afternoon. Well, it's great to have you guys, and thank you so much for joining us today. I know our travel nursing community is very interested in hearing about this topic, planning for retirement. It is a very, very popular discussion in our Gypsy Nurse Travel Network Facebook group. So we wanted to bring in two experts on to talk about proper retirement planning. I know you guys have some great insights and some fantastic experience here. So rather than keeping anybody waiting, we'll let you guys jump in here, and we will join you at the end.
Very good. Can you hear me? Hello? Oh,
Gene, I can hear you.
okay, good. Thank you, because I had to, my mic went off and I had to switch mics real quick. So thanks, David. So hello, everyone.
Sure.
And thank you, David, for joining me. Guess what? Everybody will retire someday. And what we want to provide for you today is what are some of the best options for you as a traveler, and how to think about how being a traveler is different and could impact your thinking on what retirement savings option you might select, or options. You might select more than one. Before we get started, we have to do our basic disclaimer. David and I are going to help you all think about how to do this well and which options are best, but we can't give you specific advice on choosing without knowing your complete financial background, which we don't know. So one of the things we would start with is, since everybody is going to retire someday, is we would encourage you to have someone who is your advisor that can help you, but this should inform you to make smart decisions and know what great questions to ask the financial advisor that you select. So with that being said, let's just go on to our first slide. So there are some keys to success for you. And one of the things that is a key to success is to have a plan. I have a boss from many years ago who used to say, plan the work and then work the plan. So I guess I would say plan your retirement and then work that retirement plan so that you actually do have retirement savings ready when you're ready to retire. One of the things that's a part of that plan is to consistently put dollars into it. If you take a break from putting dollars in, try to catch it back up. But consistency can be a real boost to your retirement savings, because it gets you in the habit. You don't miss it so much for your day-to-day. It also helps diversify over time frames of ups and downs in the market so that you're in it all the time and you get that average earnings instead of being in it heavy in one time or the other. Another thing we would tell you to think about as a key to success is to maximize your savings when at all possible. There are limits on how much you can put in tax-free. We would encourage you to meet all those limits. We'll talk about some of that in some more details later, but part of your plan, consistency, and maximizing your savings whenever you can. Something we're going to spend a big part of today on is these next two topics, specifically on choosing the correct retirement savings vehicle for you. Not for me, not for David, Rachel, or Steve, but how do you think about your situation and what does traveling mean to your situation that helps point you towards different options and different ways for your retirement savings. And going along with consistency and maximizing, the sooner you start saving, the more that there will be in those retirement accounts when you decide to retire. So we would encourage you to start saving sooner rather than later. And we're going to show you a few numbers later in this session that talk to you about how those show you how those dollars can gain faster the sooner you start. David, what else do you have for us on savings keys?
Yeah, there's a couple things I'd like to add. I think one of them being a person who's a little bit closer to retirement and trying to be, again, very transparent, very honest with every single one of you. I think what you will find is that as you get close to retirement is that if you have put away and you've been diligent about your savings, you give yourself a lot more options as you get closer. And that's, we like to boil a lot of things in the retirement business down to simple things and simple statements. And, gosh, I've done this for over 30 years. And I think the one thing I would tell you is that if you save and you save properly, it's not going to guarantee that you're going to be happy. It's not going to, guarantee that you're going to be rich. But what it will do as you get closer to retirement is it will give you options. And I think those options are oh so important. Some of the things that come into play, a lot of the statistics that we see show that people, as they get near retirement, a lot of times, medically or otherwise, have reasons that they don't want to necessarily work as long as maybe they thought they were going to work. And typically it's medical issues. Something gets in the way of being able to be a full-time employee. So having those options by putting money away in a plan like this is really, really valuable as you get older and closer to retirement. I think the other thing we all kind of know is that there are certain things in life you can control and some other things in life you can't control. And, I've always kind of believed in this statement about, worry about the things that you can control and, set aside the things you can't. Well, this is something you can control. So the more that you can, put together an action plan and kind of move forward with things, I think the better it is really for your mental capacity as you get older and just your mental well-being. I know a lot of the things that we focus on, from a financial perspective, and Gene, you know these two words that come out a lot is financial wellness. And so much of finance and doing some of these little things these days is tied to your overall emotional well-being and your health. So I think, there's other attributes when you start talking about, having a plan for savings that are important. I think one thing that stuck Gene, as you were talking and I thought about this is that, there's all kinds of quirky little sayings out there and everything as it relates to some of these topics. And, I've never been like a super science person, but I read some pretty cool books when I was younger about, inventors and things of that sort. And Albert Einstein's one that comes to mind where you think, okay, this guy's like incredibly brilliant as a human being and as an individual. And one of the things that he said is that that the most amazing thing that he saw during his lifetime was not an invention or experiment, but was understanding the power of compounding. And it sounds kind of quirky, but at the same time, you look at it and say, okay, here's somebody whose mind was wrapped up in all these super complex things, and of everything that, he ultimately chose to focus on, it was the power of compounding, which really has to do with this starting saving sooner rather than later, as I know we're going to talk about here in a little bit.
Thanks, David. So,
Sure.
Travelers, you all know that options are important, right? When you're looking at assignments.
Gene, I can't hear you right now, just so you know.
Okay, can you hear me now?
There you go.
I'm sorry, everyone. I'm just having mic problems today, and I tested it earlier, but there you go. Best laid plans. Anyway, I was saying travelers love options. When you're looking for a new assignment, you don't just look at one. You look at two or three most of the time. You pick the one that best suits you. You make a plan for how you're going to enjoy that assignment. So David has some great points for us there that you can have control of this, and you can have options that take stress off worrying about that thing, so you can spend your energy on other stuff. So that's what we want to help you with today. And quite frankly, something we should have said earlier, thank you to the Gypsy nurse for taking such good care of the traveler community and caring enough about you to have conferences like this and providing topics to help you. So this is one of those. So we're going to move now into thinking about choosing the correct retirement savings vehicle. There are options for you to pick from, and we've tried to put a table together here for you as simply as we can that will help you understand some of the differences. So at a very, very high level, a 401k, something you've probably all heard a lot about, 401ks are provided through your employer. Your staffing agency will provide a 401k. Some agencies have them and some don't, so just understand that. But 401k savings retirement vehicles are provided from your employer. An IRA is something that you can go get on your own at any time. So that's one of the main differences between these, and makes a difference for you on some of the options and differences that we're going to talk about later as we go through these. So the first thing to think about is participation. Because the 401k is provided by your employer, and 401ks are regulated by ERISA and many other rules and things that we won't go into, they have participation rules. And there are waiting periods for pretty much every 401k out there in the world about how long you have to wait, or how long you have to have been an employee of that agency or hospital if you're looking at permanent nursing. How long do you have to wait before you can participate in the program? Participation can also have a piece of eligibility, and that's part of that waiting period. You might have to have worked for 1,000 hours or 6 months or something before you can even be a part of the program. So that's one of the questions to ask when you're looking at different agencies, or if you're looking at a 401k program with the agency you prefer, is what is that waiting period? What is the participation and eligibility rules, so that you'll know what that is before you can get involved. With an IRA, you can go to many banks, many investment firms, the Merrill Lynch's, the Edward Jones, your local bank that you deal with all the time, and set IRAs up while you're sitting there and get them started immediately. David, do you have any other guidance for us on participation or eligibility that our folks should consider?
Gina, I like your list, and I think the way that you put it together. The great thing about an IRA, as the name implies, IRA stands for individual retirement account. So it is your own individual account and nobody else's. A 401k is really, it's a retirement account sponsored by a company that you have the ability to participate in. The IRA is, as you mentioned, anytime, anywhere. You've got earned income, you could put money in an IRA. Doesn't matter if you're working for one company one year, one company the next year. So I think when you look at a 401k plan, all of them are going to have different features when it comes to this list that you've got here. So, some 401ks, and what tends to be a little more common today than it was 10 years ago, will let you contribute potentially or participate right away. You've got other plans where you might need to be there a month, 3 months. You still even find a couple that are 6 months or a year potentially. But I think when I look at the list, and I think about these, there are a couple on here that for me, if I'm a Gypsy nurse and I might be, not necessarily going to stay at one employer for a long period of time, I'm looking or focusing in on, okay, what's the wait period until I can actually start participating in the plan? And then is there an employer match? And then the key part that I know we're going to get into in a little bit is, okay, how long do I have to be here before I get to keep some or all of that match? Because matches aren't worth much if the money goes in today, but you don't get to keep it because you left before you hit kind of some of these, what we call vesting, kind of marks, if you will, in the plan. So, I mean, I think those are all really good points, as you see there. I know we'll get to it a little bit later on, but I'll mention it now, and that's this part about the contribution cap. In that, I think the IRA definitely makes the most sense in almost all cases, except for maybe a couple. And one of them might be if you've got a gypsy nurse or a travel nurse, and I'm kind of in this situation now, so I relate to a little bit more. And Gene, I know you are as well too, where my kids are out of the house, so I don't have car expenses and college expenses. And, fortunately, I've been able to pay my house off and everything. And, sometimes the way that work careers set up is people, when they get older and they don't have the expenses, a lot of times, if you did happen to have kids and or a family, those are behind you, and you might want to put as much away for retirement in kind of a tax advantage situation as possible. And that's when a 401k can potentially come in handy, because the limits around there are quite a bit higher. As you mentioned there, almost $20,000 that you can put in on a pre-tax basis into a 401k plan, with another $6,500 if you're age 50 or older. So $26,000 is a pretty good amount on a pre-tax basis. And again, that's just your money. Even if you're not going to pick up a matching contribution. Little less, obviously, with the IRA. It's about $7,500 for the same situation, $6,500, and then $1,000 catch up. So, there's a couple nuances and a couple differences in here where, the IRA is, that's the go-to choice. And then there's situations where it's like, okay, let me run down this list on the left and kind of check a few of these boxes and ask a few questions. And maybe there's a situation where that 401k makes sense. And then if I transition employers, I can just do an IRA rollover and put that into my IRA that I already have exists. So couple things that kind of struck me when I looked at this slide.
And David has got right to the crux of the issue for you folks as travelers. So one of the advantages of being a traveler is that you can, and many of you do, take jobs from multiple agencies. Quite frankly, the rules and regulations around 401k weren't written and designed for folks like you who jump around between employers. So one of the advantages for you as a traveler is you can do that. You can jump around. You can take the job that's the place you want to be, the hospital you want to be, the beach, the mountains, whatever it is. But the 401k regulations were written, designed around, and thought about from longer term employment. So that's one of the things to think about as you look at these differences between the two. To David's point, IRA stands for individual retirement account. It's yours. You can take it with you wherever you go. It follows you wherever you go. It's always yours. It starts from the beginning. You can't put as much into it, and you don't get an employer match on it, but it's yours from the beginning. The 401k is very much attached to that employer. So if you're thinking about hopping around between agencies a lot, that could be one of the things that makes a 401k make not as much sense. If you are sticking with an agency, or you're with one agency most of the time and just occasionally go somewhere else, that might be an opportunity where you want to do some of both, maybe, so that you're putting into an IRA during that time you're with that other agency, but you got your 401k with your main agency all the time. So let's continue down our list and keep thinking about those differences as we look at between the two types of savings vehicles we have on here. So the next one is contributing. When you're in a 401k, you're going to sign up, and whatever contribution you decide to put in, the employer will take it right out of your check for you and put it over there. And you will likely have an employer match opportunity, which we'll talk about next. With an IRA, it's up to you. You can move dollars when you want. What we recommend for travelers here at TNAA is we have direct deposit, as I believe all agencies do. Make your IRA account one of the places you direct deposit money into. And then you sort of made it equivalent with the 401k as far as the ease to yourself of contributing to your retirement savings. And you've also then helped yourself with that consistency moment we talked about earlier, that it just goes in there and you don't even have to think about it. So if you choose IRA, look at that direct deposit opportunity as a way to get some money in there. And if you choose 401k, the contribution will be taken from your check and plunked right over into your retirement savings for you. Now, an advantage of an employer match on 401k, what does that mean? To David's point, and similar to the participation and eligibility, how much an employer matches is a wide range of things. There are different kinds of 401ks. There's regulars and safe harbors and et cetera, and rules and regulations around those, plus the employer or agency's choice of how they want to do it could mean that you get nothing as an employer match. That doesn't make the 401k bad because you're still getting tax deferred retirement savings. But one of the advantages of a 401k is that the employer could be matching some of your contributions. Common things are like if you put in 5%, the employer will put in 2 or 3%, and those formulas vary. But that's one of the questions for you to ask and understand in making your decision is, what kind of match or not does the employer have? And those are, again, based on the type of plan and the plan choices and options of each employer. David, is there anything else on contributing and employer matching that I've left out?
I think you did I think, this is it's a good chart and you're hitting on the main highlights. I think one of the things from my perspective is be strategic and just know if there's 3 questions you want to ask if you're working for an employer, ask those 3 questions and it'll help you make your decision. The IRA, kind of as we talked about, definitely to me the go-to vehicle. But then there's always, this thing that, the way the provisions work is that if by chance you're in a 401k, and the 3 questions I would ask is, how long do I have to work here before I'm able to participate? Is there an employer match? And how long do I have to work before I get to keep some or all of that employer match are the 3 questions I would want to ask. And then the idea is just that, if you get positive answers into that, is that when you change jobs, one of the things I would suggest, and again, everybody's a little bit different, but we see this sometimes, is that when you leave that employer, take that 401k with you and move it into that IRA account, which you've got the ability to do very easily under the regulations. I think the, government, IRS, whatever it happens to be, understands that it's easier to keep these all in one spot or to have an IRA that's kind of a conglomeration of not only your individual contributions, but also 401k contributions you've made in the past. But you've got that ability to move these into a single account. One of the, kind of said another way, one of the things that we see a lot in 401k plans is what I'll call almost kind of abandoned accounts. And it's just where people maybe put a couple $1,000s away and then some life occurrences happened and then they just kind of forgot about an account, or maybe they had the money somewhere in the investments based on what was going on currently, and they didn't get back and kind of restructure the investments and things of that sort. So, to me, it's be strategic with the 401k, but use the IRA as kind of that, kind of single account that everything ends up getting kind of funneled into, so that hopefully you've got one single account that you have to manage to help keep your life simple over time.
And there's a method to our madness in our table. That's those 3 important questions, or 3 of the first ones we tried to talk about in our table, right? How long do I have to wait till I can participate? Are you going to match what I put in? And how long do I have to work for you, dear agency, before the money is mine? And that's the vesting thing that's next on the list. That's how long you are required to work for the employer before the employer match part of the money is yours. So let's be clear, any contribution you put into a 401k is yours. But there could be rules around how long you have to work for the company before a part or all of the employer match is yours to take with you should you leave. So there's two sort of waiting games. One is how long before I can be participating in the plan? And then once I'm participating, is there a wait time before the employer match money is mine? Again, on an IRA, it's only your money with no match, so there's no worrying about when the match is mine. On the 401k, you're getting extra money put in there, and it's knowledge about when that extra additional contribution from the employer is yours. Another thing to think about, and we're going to sort of skip a little bit down to that portability because we've talked about it. In with vesting and in with participation, there's another component of time called break in service. If you stick mostly with one agency and you pop over to somebody else every once in a while, you would want to understand the break in service rules of that company's 401k plan, because that's what's going to tell you if you can go pop to another agency and come back over to your main one with or without impacts on your 401k. So if you intend to be with the same agency for quite some time, 401ks can be very valuable. If you're popping around some, you want to understand the participation, the vesting, and those break-in service rules so that you'll know what your choices of taking assignments with different agencies, what impact that will have on your 401k. Big advantage in getting that employer match, a little bit of a price to pay on some of those employer loyalty kind of things that are tied to that match. Next, let's talk about taxes on retirement savings. With a 401k, any money that you put in is pre-tax. You don't pay income taxes, Social Security or Medicare taxes on money you put into a 401k retirement account. Our government wants us to save for retirement, and this is one of the ways they're motivating us to do so, is by not taxing today the money that you put in there. Any contributions you receive from your employer also are not taxed. That money does get taxed when you take it out, when you retire and you take that money out to use it. So the theory here is that while you're working, you're making more money and your income tax percentage is higher. And so not paying taxes on it now ends up giving you more money than paying taxes on it later when you take it out and are theoretically in a lower tax bracket when you retire. So there's a couple of advantages to the not paying taxes. One is all the money that you put in there keeps building more money for you in that compounding scenario that David talked about, and we're going to visit again next. So you're earning more money on more money, and because the taxes are not in there and you're paying taxes later at hopefully a lesser rate than you would if you paid them now. On an IRA, there are both kinds of opportunity. A traditional IRA mirrors the tax situation on a 401k. You don't pay taxes on it now. You pay taxes on it when you retire. Should you think that you might make more in retirement than you do now, or should you think that your tax bracket or income tax rate will be higher when you retire than it is now, you can choose to put money in a Roth IRA. A Roth IRA, you pay taxes now on those earnings, but you don't pay taxes when you take that money out later. David, do you have anything to expand on there on taxes and what our travelers should think about?
I think you covered it with what you've got there. I think that's really gets to kind of the heart of what we see as it relates to taxes. You know, the only thing I would potentially add is that we've seen most companies over time add a Roth kind of ability, a Roth 401k kind of contribution source to their plans over time as more participants have chosen to use those. Another situation we see the Roth come into play occasionally in the 401k or the IRA area is if you're just starting out your career as a travel nurse and you kind of go thinking about, I'm just getting started. I'm in a lower tax bracket and, I expect to be making more money in 5 or 10 years from now. And let's just say you happen to be in a situation where, maybe you have a family or a child or two, and you just know you're going to have some deductions as well. That could be another situation potentially where that Roth would make sense. But, most of the time people use that traditional source, and that tends to be the way that people go. But I think it's always good to at least kind of run that Roth by yourself and say, is there anything going on in this particular year where I'm going to put money into either an IRA or 401k, but for one reason or another, my income is going to be lower than it typically is. And in that case, potentially it makes sense to use the Roth and, rather than taking the advantage of not paying taxes on the amount you put in, alternatively, reaping the benefit of not having the earnings taxed later on when you pull them out at retirement.
This ties back into one of our themes today, David, of options. Some people, raise your hand, myself included, put some money in both kinds. Diversify your basket potentially. I have some money in Roth and traditional type things and not just like split 50-50 or whatever. There's different ways to do that. To your point, some years different than others, some earnings different than others, etc. But yes, I had forgotten many 401ks do have a Roth option now. I believe ours here at TNAA has a Roth option as well. So you could Roth your 401k if you prefer. And it's named Roth after the individual that I think passed the radio. I've been asked that before. What's a Roth? I think it's the last name of somebody who designed these way back in the day. So tidbit.
That's right. There used to be a plan. Remember the Keogh plans from way back, Gene? And people say, I want one of those keyhole plans. They mispronounced the name and think it actually said something else. Absolutely. All this stuff, it pays, I think, over time. Not that you got to spend a lot of time, but it pays to educate yourself on the differences. And there's small nuances between, these different types of plans. One of the other things, that I just was thinking about, Gene, when you mentioned that, you put some money in both the traditional 401k or traditional IRA and some money in the Roth source. That Roth source is fairly unique in that, the government lets you you don't have to pay that out to a survivor if you're thinking that you want to put some money away and then give it to somebody else when you die. And, not to get way far ahead of ourselves, but, the Roth has some very specific provisions around it, in terms of estate planning that the pre-tax money doesn't. And again, if in simple terms, if you think about it, the government already got paid their money on the Roth, so they're not worried about what happens to it in the future. Where with that pre-tax amount, if you were to die and you have money in that, whether it's yourself or your beneficiary, they're going to want that tax money that they were owed because they've given you that pre-tax advantage. So, just kind of over time, familiarizing yourself with some of these little nuances, getting back to what you mentioned in the beginning, it lets you kind of tailor where you put your money to your own unique situation and your goals and what you think works the best for each of you individually.
Yeah, and this is a moment again to say, guess what? A financial advisor would be a good idea. And you don't necessarily have to have an extraordinarily expensive financial advisor. There are folks who will help you pick these out and get these accounts started up with little to no expense from the advisor role. But you being able to tell them some of your individual wants, desires, and situations, they can help you on top of this foundational knowledge we're giving you today. They can help you even further define and pick which is best for you if you feel like you need that advice.
I think
Couple more.
that's such a good point, Gene, that you raised there too, because, you know, a lot of times and I would put myself in your shoes, and I don't work with individuals, I work with companies, but I know when I had to make that personal choice myself, it was like, how do I kind of take that first step and everything? And I don't want to commit to writing a big check and, all these financial commitments. One of the things I would tell each of you is that there are some very talented individuals that work even for some of the mutual fund companies. And I'll just throw a couple names out there, would be like Fidelity or a Vanguard or a T. Rowe Price or some of them. And, you have people that are trained in, how to help ask the right questions of you, to give you direction and things of that sort. And in many cases with individuals like that, you're not going to have to pay them unless you're looking for very specific investment advice, just to get educated on, what are the best things to do. And, a long time ago in my career, when I first started out, I was working on the phones for a mutual fund company. And, when you're taking 50 to 100 calls a day and they're coming at you from all different angles, a lot of these people get very good at understanding what the rules and regulations are. So isn't always that you got to go out and, hire somebody that's a kind of a paid individual. A lot of these companies that, just offer, some of the most popular IRA type vehicles, or that manage these 401k plans, have staffs of employees that can answer all the good basic questions you have without charge.
Yeah. And a lot of those same companies, David, have some pretty good tools on their websites as well. If you want to just sort of play around with some of your own numbers, they'll ask you, how much do you already have in savings? How much do you think you're going to need per month when you retire? It'll ask you some of those basic questions and put them into some calculators for you that will help you start thinking about it too. And that could be good ammunition for thinking how to move forward and put your plan together.
Yeah, and not to get too far down the road with it, but the other thing that the number one question that comes up in 401k plans is, how should I invest my money? And most of you are probably familiar with it, but about 15 years ago in the 401k industry, somebody came up with a bright idea to create something called a target date fund. And it's simply a fund that has what the target date is. It's the year that's closest to the year in which you think you're going to retire. So, in a simple example, if, one of you that happened to be on this WebEx was 40 years old, and you said, I really want to retire when I'm about 60 years old, a target date fund that was for the year 2040, which is about 20 years from now, would work great for you. And it's just literally, it is a fund. If you hear something like a target date 2040 fund, it's a fund that a company will manage for you, in most cases with no additional charge, that is designed for a person that's going to retire in and about the same year that you're thinking about retiring. And then it'll just pool your money together with all the other people that are going to retire in about 20 years. And then you don't have to get in the middle of making that decision that, again, is kind of one of those financial questions that oftentimes is an impediment to kind of getting started. So again, free advice from a lot of these mutual fund companies. And then at the same time, these target date funds are terrific investments for people who are like, I don't want to choose my own investments. Just give me a simple solution and everything. And, that's what these target date funds are so good for.
Yeah, you do need a plan, but the execution of the plan doesn't have to be horribly difficult. The execution of the plan can be pretty simple, to David's point, to get started, or you can make it more sophisticated, if you will, if you choose to, and you want to go pick individual investments, and that's a thing you keep up with. You can, there's a broad range of that, everything from the simple, just get me started, to more sophistication. So you can pick those. We talked a little bit earlier, David did for us, about the contribution caps. Here's another one of those moments where the 401k appears to and is an advantage in that you can put more into them tax-free. But again, remember that the employer match part, you have to wait to earn, you have to wait to get in, and to tie that in with the portability between employers that we've talked some about. If you leave that employer, You might be leaving your employer match on the table, and there will be some paperwork and a bit of work to do to get that money moved either to your new employer. Rollover is what they're called. Roll it over to your new employer's 401k or roll it over into your IRA. There'll be, I say paperwork, some online work is probably more like it, but there will be a little bit of work to do. Whereas with the IRA, it just stays with you forever with little to no maintenance. So to sort of sum this up, and then we'll talk about the advantage of starting sooner rather than later. The 401k has some more complexity to it, particularly to you as a traveler, potentially changing employers, changing agencies. The advantages of it are that you can put more in, that you're going to get matched from your employer potentially, and the offset then though is that moving around, and there's some waiting periods involved and a little more paperwork time if you choose to leave that employer. On the IRA side, it is really darn easy in pretty much every category, but there's less dollars that you can put into it. And that's sort of the summary of how to think about those two. So we've talked about the sooner you start, the more you'll have later. So we're going to look next at this scenario of start saving sooner rather than later. Compounding earnings, which is what David was talking about earlier, can make a big difference over time. And what does compounding earnings mean? So what it means is if you put $50 in this week and you earn $2 on that next week, then the following week you have $52 that you're earning on, and then you have $60 that you're earning on. So the earnings on the earnings is the compounding part. And the sooner you get started, the earlier you get started, the more time there is for the earnings to earn on themselves. So you don't just earn on what you put in, you earn on the earnings along the way. So that's what compounding means. And what a difference 10 years can make. So these scenarios, and I used one of those calculators on one of those sites that we talked about to come up with these numbers. If you put $50 a week into your retirement savings account, and your retirement savings account is earning 5%, if you do that for 35 years, you have $241,000. If you do that for 25 years, you have $127,000. So 10 years cuts that amount almost in half. And that's all about that 10 years of earnings on earnings, and the bigger the number gets. If you go to 15 years, it's $58,000, cuts in half again. So even if it's smaller dollars, even if it's just $50 now, maybe it could be 100 or 200 later, but starting at 50 now and doing 50 for 10 years is better than waiting 7 or 8 years and then putting in 100 for 3 years, because it can be earning on itself. So please think about the advantage of compounding earnings and get started sooner rather than later. What else is there to say?
From my perspective,
about compounding, David.
I think, Gene, I think
we
this
lost
is
David
the most.
For a second. Oh, there we are. We froze for a second.
I think this is the most important piece, and you kind of mentioned the word execution earlier, is that, gosh, we've all, been through that stage earlier on in our career, maybe a little bit later, when it was just like, there's 15 other things I want to do besides put money into a 401k. And I'll use, in today's day and age, instant gratification is everywhere. You just flip on your TV or go to a car dealer or a restaurant, and, there are 1,000 ways to spend your money and get instant gratification. But nothing will benefit you more than starting sooner rather than later. And what Gene gets at on this slide, it's kind of funny, because it was probably a year or so ago, and I was playing golf with a guy that I play with on the weekends and whatnot. We just have a regular group from our hometown, and we'll get together. And I happen to be playing with the guy's son, and we had a real good conversation. He was just finishing up college and whatnot. And, he knew what I did, and we were talking about it. He said, what's the one piece of advice you have for me and everything? And, and I wasn't like I was waiting for the question or anything, because I wasn't. But when I really thought about it, I said, the best thing when it comes to thinking about retirement is just start trying to put some money away as soon as you can and as early as you can. Because if you can have even a small amount of dollars compound for 40 years versus a larger amount that only compounds for 5 years, that it's amazing how much, that 40-year compounding money will be worth by the time you get to retirement. So it's just, just start as early as you can, even if it just happens to be a little bit.
You can end up with way more in the end, having put the same amount in, if you start putting it in smaller increments earlier versus waiting. We have a comment for Krista. Thank you, Krista, that I want to talk about for a second. Krista is reminding us that the target funds are easy, but that you might need to think about the expenses of various funds. So that's one of the things that you could put on your list to ask about as you're putting your money away is, are the expenses of the 401k being paid by the participants? Are they being paid by the company? What is the expense ratio for the funds? That's a higher level, more sophisticated question. I think Krista's been doing some retirement planning to know about asking that question. So good for you, Krista. But do think about that component as you're making your choice for what you want to be in. David has helped many companies, I know, figure that out for their employers, how to get the most earnings at the least expense. If you're getting 10% earnings, but it's a 5% expense, you're better off with something that's 7% earnings and 1% expense, because you end up with 6 instead of 5. So a thing to think about as you make your choices along the way.
Yeah, I love the comment. It's so important that you make a good decision as it relates to expenses. So, when Jean and I started working together at Travel Nurse, one of the very first things that we did was that we moved almost all the investments, and especially those target date funds, to target dates that invested in indexes as the underlying investments. So they're very inexpensive at the end of the day. So great point. And I really like, that you're thinking about that, and that, hey, there is more to it. And, that second level thinking is, keep your expenses as low as you can. We like to say in simple terms in the business, if you're investing in a very inexpensive option like an index option, even including a target date fund, if you're running a 100-yard dash every year, you're starting out with a 5-yard head start every year if you've got the lowest expenses out there. So again, it's really good comment. It's very astute. And just to kind of play off of that, one of the things that we see in the 401k world that's available to you as well in the IRA world is that there are target date funds where the underlying investments are all indexes, and they're very, very inexpensive.
Okay, so I thought I turned off my instant messaging, but apparently not. Sorry about that. Last slide for us today. We sort of wanted to remind you of the bottom line. What's the bottom line of all this? Because that was a lot of info, right? We hope a lot of really good info, but it was a lot of info. So if we have to give you a bottom line, we would say plan for retirement. And that means pick the thing that is best for you. We hope today's information has helped you select that, and or you find a financial advisor to help you, and start saving now. Start saving now and maximize your contributions whenever possible. So if we think about that in one big picture, it's do something and put in as much as you can as soon as you can. So don't wait, and get going would be our biggest piece of advice. I'm looking over, David, if you have any closing remarks for our travelers. I'm looking over to see if we have any other questions or comments we should speak to.
Yeah, I think it was, and again, I only bring this up. I think it was Woody Allen, but I'm not sure. But there was a comment made that I think is so true, which is 90% of life is just showing up. And when it comes to, saving for retirement, you can micromanage a lot of this stuff to kind of, sit there and think about it and think about it and think about it. But I love Gene's slide here, which is just start saving now. And I think one of the things you think about is nothing will get you more focused on doing exactly the best thing for you than knowing you've got some of your own money invested. But I think it's that action of saying, start a plan of action and then just move forward. And like anything, once you're invested, then you'll start getting an interest in things, and you'll just get better and more experienced as time goes on. But I think the important thing is just to jump in, and the earlier the better. But also on the other hand, it's never too late. So gosh, I've been with the company I was at, I'm with now since 2004, and so I saved diligently since I've been here, and I'm surprised just in this last 15 years with between the 401k money I put away and the match, how big it's grown, even in that 15 plus year time frame. So it's never too late, but sooner the better.
So done with slides. To wrap up, I would like to thank you again so much, David, for joining us. Your wisdom is going to help the travel nurse community. I would like to thank Gypsy Nurse for caring so much about the travel community and just being there for them and sponsoring events and talks like this for their benefit. And I will apologize for my technical difficulties with the mic. People were like, "You're on mute." And I'm like, "No, I wish I was on mute because that's easy. My mic isn't working."
You're on mute. You're on mute is the catchphrase of the last 12 months. Gene,
Yes,
so no
exactly.
worries. It happens to everybody.
Exactly.
Yeah, if I could too, I just like to thank each one of you that's on the line for serving everybody in the public during this past 12 months during the pandemic. And gosh, as people that are out there, especially in a situation like you are, where you're moving to location to location, and I'm sure where people wanted you to go the most is where there was the most issues. And I just can't thank you enough for what you're doing out there to serve the community, and anything we can do. This is just a pleasure for me to be involved in. I can't thank you enough.
Healthcare heroes.
Absolutely. Well, David and Gene, thank you so much for the information you provided, and that in and of itself is a service to the travel nursing community and the Gypsy nurse community, because retirement, as we were talking about earlier, is such a big issue in the community. And I think some of the takeaways certainly are start early if you can, but it's never too late to start. And try and do what you can. I think it's these days we're all kind of living for the moment, but yet a bit of proper planning for the future, I think, it pays dividends to use a phrase there. But thank you both very much for that great information. And again, this information is also going to be available on demand on our website. So in case anybody missed it or only caught parts of it, they'll be able to go back to our website and the virtual events page for the virtual conference 2021 and navigate over to this and grab this information. So it's all there, and it will be there for any future reference. But thank you both very much. Excellent information. I know the community appreciated it.
Yes,
You're
thank
welcome.
you.
Our pleasure.
All right, Rachel.
Well, that was great. I hope all of you guys learned a lot of great information. That was such a great session. And we have one more left today. But if you want to see any of the previous ones, just hop on to the gypsynurse.com over to that events tab, and you can check out those previous sessions, as well as if you want to keep this conversation going, if you want to ask them questions or anything like that, be sure to put it in the comments, and we'll make sure that they are notified of those questions. So I think is it for our day, right, Steve? Well, we have one more picture.
Right. One more tonight at 6 p.m. where we're going to learn how to take great pictures while we're on assignment, which is another hot topic within the travel nursing community. When you go out to all these fun places, you want to have pictures to remember things by. and we're going to have an expert here, a travel nurse expert, talk about how to take fantastic pictures while you're on assignment. But that was a great session, Rachel, and again, I think we're providing great information to our travel nurse community, and hopefully they can refer back to it as needed in the financial stuff. And we've got a lot of other things coming up over the next couple of days. Did you want to remind people about the prizes and gifts, not only for this session, but also for the other sessions as well?
Yeah, definitely. If you go to thegypsynurse.com and register as like a registered member, or if you register for the conference, then you're going to be entered to win a $100 Amazon gift card. If you comment and ask questions within the next 24 hours, we will be giving away a $50 Amazon gift card for this session. And then for the next session, we will be giving away a $25 Etsy gift card for filters, which if you don't know what photo filters are, Tyler's going to explain all about those and how they help bring out the story in your pictures, and how they just give you this feeling of the area. So we have a lot of great stuff coming up.
6 o'clock Eastern tonight. Must-see streaming events.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you, and we'll see you all at 6 o'clock.
Okay, Rachel, see you later on.